and they're amazing. Mine are just okay, but we'll get everybody piled in here and then we'll get started. Anybody do anything fun and exciting so far this week? Anybody have a closing or a showing or fun vacation time? You're also quiet. Don't be scared. All right, it is 10:02, so I'm going to go ahead and kick this party off. Misa, if you'd be so kind, just keep an eye on the participant side, and if people request to jump in, just go ahead and let them in.
Yep.
Before we start, I'm going to drop a link in the chat. Just set that aside. We'll put it in there again before we wrap up because I'm sure more people will come in a couple minutes late. But today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects. And if you think of more traditional prospecting, you might think of this, but I don't like to think of it as the traditional prospecting. We're just going to talk about how we actually make money in this business. So if I was to ask you all, where do your commissions come from? Hopefully you say something other than the CDA or the closing table, because while you do get paid at the closing table, the actual money that you earn happens way, way, way before the closing table, right? We can't have closings unless we have clients that are under contract. We can't have clients under contract unless we've first built a relationship with someone that trusts us. And we can't build relationships with someone without having a conversation with them first. So when you think about that in a very real sense, all of your commissions come from conversations. And, you know, I know that the word cold calling gets a bad rap, and I actually hate that term as well. I never use it. So if you're thinking in your head, conversations mean cold calling in the traditional sense of how most people do it, it doesn't. But you have to decide who you're going to talk to, what conversations you're going to have in order to build the relationships that ultimately turn into business for you. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. I'm hopefully going to give you some ideas, and maybe some of these you've seen, but you haven't seen it from the same angle. And maybe some of these you've never seen, you know, like I didn't even think that that was a conversation I could have to grow my business. And so that's going to be the purpose of the call. Let me share my screen really quick. And then y'all do me a big favor and just give me a thumbs up. That's also why I like to have cameras on. Thumbs up if you can see my slide. Thumbs up if the slide changed. Okay, perfect. So it looks like we're good. So just want to make sure that the technology is working for us. So you guys already know me, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this. I'll spend like 30 seconds on it just for someone that might watch the replay, doesn't know who I am. I'm Walt. I'm a Hawaiian shirt aficionado, and I also sell a lot of real estate. Real estate coach, published author about real estate investor. I've been licensed in multiple states. I've done business in multiple states. I do a lot of fun real estate. I love this stuff. One of the things I love to do is try to teach other agents in an industry with a 87% statistical failure rate how I've done well so that they can go out and do well for themselves. That's really what these calls are all about. Every call that we host is about giving you something you can use to go build your own business, go make more money, go be more successful. Because unfortunately, we do work in an industry that is rife with failure. It's such a horrible statistic out there, but it's been that way for a very long time. In any given year, 80 to 90% of real estate agents don't make it. So we try to fix that problem with knowledge and training. What we are going to discuss today is what I call quality conversations, how to build relationships that build your business. This is actually one of the first coaching calls that I ever did for other agents. I was in some social media groups years ago and just seeing all of the comments about lead generation and prospecting, and I can't afford this, and what about that? And I started just pinging agents and giving them some thoughts. And I literally started teaching this very course. If you remember, if you're old enough to remember when Facebook had Facebook rooms, it was like Facebook's attempt to do a Zoom call, and you could actually host a live call inside the Facebook group. And I used to host this call about once a month inside certain Facebook groups that I was a member of. Now, I don't think Facebook has rooms anymore. I think that's gone by the wayside. But this is kind of how it all started, because this is really how I built my business, and I did well. So I thought, well, if some schmuck like me can do well with this, anybody can. So what we're going to talk about today is, first and foremost, a little bit of the psychology behind the conversation. And that might sound really nerdy. I promise I won't get like PhD level nerd on you, maybe like master's degree level nerd. But we have to talk a little bit about what people expect in their head and how that expectation is really not true. We'll talk about having the right attitude, who to call, right? So we're going to talk about several different types of conversations you can have, how to call those particular people, what to say when you get them on the phone, or in person if you go talk to them in person. And then one of the most important aspects is, how do we properly follow up with those people so that we nurture the relationship until they're ready to do business? Because the reality is, you don't get to pick when your clients buy and sell a house. You just need to have lots of people that know you and trust you and refer you and are there you are there when they need real estate, but you don't get to dictate when they need the real estate. So it's very, very important to have that follow-up down. And then we'll do a little Q&A session at the end in case there's something that sparked your thoughts that we didn't cover. And then again, at the end of this, I will repost, for those who have just coming in a little bit late, I will repost the resources. That Google Drive will have a PDF version of this presentation, as well as a script packet for every single type of conversation we talk about today. I will give you the script that I have used to have those conversations. Okay, with all that said, let's dive a little bit into the fear versus reality, the psychology behind the conversation. It is perfectly normal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you if you are afraid to do something because you've never done it before. Every single human being on the planet has a fear of the unknown. And in many cases, when you're talking about conversations, you're talking about interaction with other human beings, they have a fear of rejection, even from a random stranger that they don't know. This is a very innate it's just something deep down in all of our psyches. So we are afraid of the unknown, which means we have to get the knowledge and skills to make it known. And we're afraid of rejection, even when we're talking to someone that doesn't know us. And so these are very, very real things. So what happens is, in our head, we blow up the worst case scenarios, right? And so, for example, if we said cold calling, you would immediately like, oh my gosh, these people are going to scream at me. They're going to hate me. They're going to threaten to sue me. They're going to slam the phone down. They're going to cuss me out, all of these crazy things. In reality, in the thousands of calls that I've made, and I've lost track of, I couldn't even tell you how many I've made, definitely hundreds of conversations. I don't think I've ever once had somebody like scream explicitives at me, threaten to sue me. Like, that stuff just actually doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. So the fear of the unknown, again, it's blown up in our head. It's not reality. Most people are not that rude. If you think about this, especially now, because it happens more and more. When was the last time somebody called you at random, right? A telemarketer, an insurance salesman, right? You name it, right? We get these spam calls all the time. When was the last time you, as the recipient of that unexpected call, ever cussed somebody out, ever threatened to sue them, ever called them bleepity bleep bleep bleep? Like, that's just not how normal human beings interact with each other. And so I venture to say that you've probably never done it, except maybe in a very rare occasion when they caught you on that special day. It just doesn't happen, right? What could happen is you catch somebody at a bad time, or they're frustrated because someone else called them as well, and they're very quick and short on the phone, and they hang up on you. That's possible. But that usually sounds something like, hey, thanks anyway, I'm not interested, click. Right? It's not screaming, it's not belligerent, it's not explicitives. It's usually, I'm not interested, but thanks anyway, click. Now, here's the thing. If you call somebody and in 4 seconds they say, I'm not interested, and they hang up on you, you are never, ever going to interact with that person again. And they remember the 4-second call where they said, I'm not interested in hanging up. You're never going to bump into them again in, say, the grocery store line, and they recognize your voice and, well, aren't you that guy who called me 3 weeks ago? That's just never going to occur. So the fear of rejection is an overblown reality, overblown fear in our head, and the reality doesn't match that either. Because if they say no to you, you're never going to talk to them again. Where's the rejection? They're not rejecting you. What is most likely to actually happen in reality, based on tons and tons of calls that I've made, is they will be polite and say no, thank you, or you'll make a great connection that you can then nurture and eventually close deals with, get referrals from, build your business from. So the most likely scenario is all positive. And so even though it's perfectly normal to be afraid of what we don't know, it's perfectly normal to be afraid of rejection. Those fears are unfounded and they are not based in reality. So remember that as we go through this and we talk about the different ways we can have conversations with people. Okay. The right attitude when you're making these calls helps tremendously. And what I mean by that is, if your thought process going into the call is fear, intimidation, worry, anxiety, or if it's, I don't care what they say to me, I'm just going to close this deal, I'm going to convert the client, I'm going to make the sale, you're going to approach the conversation the wrong way, and it won't be as productive for you. Right? It won't be fruitful. So there is an aspect of how we prepare our mindset to make these calls. And honestly, the goal is simple. Before you make the call, ask yourself, how can I add value to the person I'm about to call today? What is their unique problem? Not what do I want, not how many deals can I close, not how much money can I make. That stuff comes as a byproduct of the relationships. But ask yourself, what do they have going on right now? What is the unique situation that they are in? And how can I add value to them? If you approach your conversations from that perspective, you will find that it is entirely different than the cold calling sales tactics that honestly aren't that effective. And the goal is not to close a deal on the phone. Let me say that again, verbatim. The goal is not to close a deal on the phone. I think maybe in all of the thousands of calls I've made and hundreds of deals I've closed, maybe only I could probably count them on one hand actually were like, yo, I'm so glad you called me today. I was just thinking about a realtor. Yes, I want to work with you. It has happened, right? And when it happens, you're like, oh, okay, let's talk about that. But very, very rarely are you going to make an initial phone call with a random stranger and do business with them immediately. That's really not the purpose of the call. The goal of the call is just to make a new friend, right? To build an initial relationship that we can then nurture and add value to and be present with, so that when they need a real estate agent or they hear of someone that needs a real estate agent, you are the name that comes to mind and you get that business based on the relationship you've built. It is not closing deals immediately. It's making friends that close deals later. And the more friends you have, the more deals you close, right? Simple enough. Hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have questions, you're welcome to just hold on to them or drop them in the chat and we'll do some Q&A at the end. Okay, so with all that framework, all that groundwork, right? We talked about the psychology, the fear is unfounded, be friendly, have the right attitude, go make friends, go make calls. Here are some of the ways you can start conversations. Is this all inclusive? No. There are so many great ways that you can have conversations with people, but these are some of the people you can reach out to spark those relationships, or in some cases, nurture the relationship that maybe has dropped off and get them back to you being the top of mind with them. So I'll just start at the top. Sphere of influence. So many people have thousands of relationships sitting dormant in their phone, in their address book, in their email database, in their social media friends list. Your sphere is a lot larger than you think. And most people, when they think of sphere, they can go, well, let me think of all the people in my sphere. And the human brain, this is scientific, you can go look it up, I won't get super nerdy on you. The human brain can typically only hold about 20 or so key relationships in memory at the same time. right? So you might, well, I'm really close with Uncle Joe and Aunt Sally. I don't really like her much. Grandma, right? And my best friend from the book club. And very quickly, you will exhaust your list of sphere, which is why you need a great database. Because if you were to go look in your phone and count your contacts, or you were to go on social media and look at your friends or your followers, you will realize that your sphere is significantly larger than you think, except that sphere is not being kept up with properly. And so you're not top of mind with them. So your sphere is huge. And those don't have to be salesy calls, right? Those aren't, hey, Joe, you want to buy a house today? No? Okay, have a nice day. Right. We're just nurturing the relationship through friendly value adds that remind them we're in real estate. Past clients. I love to talk about this one. Again, years ago, when I first started teaching this, gosh, I can't even remember how long ago it was now. I had a real estate agent. I was doing a one-on-one coaching call with her, and she called me in tears. Like I had to slow her down because I could barely understand her at first. And once she calmed down a little bit and I asked her to just kind of walk me through what was going on that day, she says to me, I've been in real estate for years. I've always built great relationships with my clients. They all love me. They leave me great reviews. And lately, I keep seeing them list their houses that we bought together with other agents. And it's crushing me. It's tearing me up inside. I don't know what I did wrong. I thought we were friends. And I asked her, because she'd been in real estate at that point about 6 years. And I said, in the last 6 years, after you closed that purchase, when was the last time you had a conversation with your past client? And it was dead silent. Because at that moment, she realized once she closed on their purchase, she had never spoken to them again. She had never had a touch point again. And so I had to explain to her that it wasn't that she's not awesome. It wasn't that they don't love her. It wasn't that they didn't leave her 5-star reviews and were so happy with her service. It was that they have lives too. They have jobs and they have families and they have stuff and they get busy. And so 4, 5, 6 years go by. It's not their fault that they can't remember your name from a 45-day long transaction that happened 6 years ago. And so all that was happening, it wasn't her fault. Well, it was her fault because she wasn't following up, but it wasn't her fault because she did anything wrong in the transaction. It was because they genuinely forgot who she was. And when it came time to sell the home that they bought so they could upsize, downsize, sideways size, move, whatever they were doing, they couldn't remember who she was. They couldn't remember who was that great agent that we used 6 years ago. It wasn't even on their mind to try to figure that out. They just went online and found a new agent. Had she followed up consistently and had little drips of value and little touch points for those past clients, she would have listed all of their homes 6 years later because they loved her to start, but they forgot who she was. So that is absolutely on the agent. You have to follow up your past clients. There is so much business to take place from repeat and referrals when you nurture your past clients properly. Okay. Professional networks. Now, I teach an entire course now. I didn't have the course when I first started doing this. I teach an entire course now called Building Strategic Partnerships, how to leverage professional relationships to grow your business. But your professional network, right? Your lenders and title, of course, but your CPAs, your financial advisors, your estate attorneys, your divorce lawyers, anyone that has anything at all to do with a service that touches a person or a homeowner, you should have some folks in your professional network that you stay in touch with, that you periodically ping, that you see how they're doing, because that's tons and tons of referral business. And here's the beautiful thing about the professional network, right? If a realtor reaches out to me and says, hey, Walt, I've got a client, can you help them? Of course, I'm going to help them, but I'm also going to pay 25, 30% referral fee to the agent because we're both licensed agents. Well, if an estate attorney says, hey, Walt, I have a client who just cleared probate. They need to list their late father's house. Can you help them? Of course, I'm going to help them. But here's the thing. I keep all the commission because I can't pay a referral fee to an estate attorney. I can't pay a referral fee to a financial advisor. It's not allowed. So those professionals make great business for you, and your clients need their service anyway. So it's great to have them in your network so that you can refer your clients back to them as you all grow your business together. So that's a phenomenal way. Professional network, don't miss that. And again, there's a script for every single type of call that we're talking about today. So don't stress over that. I'm gonna give them all to you. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the more traditional cold calling pieces that people get scared of, but I love them. For sell by owners, one of my favorites. I have been calling for sell by owners my entire real estate career. After, just like all of you that have never done it, right? When I first started doing it, it was nerve wracking, and I had a pit in my stomach, and I was like, these people are going to hate me. They're obviously trying to do this themselves. But there is a right way to approach a for sale by owner, and it's not, hey, knucklehead, you can't sell your house on your own. I'm the professional. Let me help you do this. Right? That's not the way we approach it, or some variation of that, right? Most agents, when they call a FSBO, again, we talked about mindset and attitude. Most agents, when they call a FSBO, their mindset and their attitude is, I am going to convince this person to list their house with me. That is absolutely the wrong approach. That's the one thing that we know for sure they don't want to do right now, because that's why it's for sale by owner. And so there's a different approach there, right? We want to lead with that value I talked about and see where we can just help them, see where we can solve their problem. And if you've ever been in my FSBO courses, or creating perpetual cycle of business with FSBOs and landlords, we talk about this a lot. There are several different great value propositions that we can bring to the table for a for sale by owner without ever asking to list their house. But when you add that value, when you build that relationship, when you nurture it with proper follow-up, those FSBOs wind up asking you to list their house if you haven't already sold it with a buyer for them. So there is phenomenal business to be done there. It's a completely different approach that you need to take, and you'll see that in the script, and maybe in the Q&A, if we have time, we can dive a little bit deeper into that. But don't make the call expecting to change somebody's mind or expecting to convince somebody to do something that you want them to do. Always focus on, where's the value here? How can I help? How can I add value to the person I'm talking to? And then the relationships will naturally blossom from there. Landlords is very similar, right? If you are actively looking for, just Joe Schmo individual landlords, not big giant corporate, mega investors, but average Joe Schmo with a few properties, and you see their listing for their house that they are currently trying to rent out, it's a perfect time to call them and see if you can add some value. Maybe you can help them find a tenant. It's possible. Maybe you can talk about whether they might want to sell that one if the numbers look good now. Maybe they've had it for a few years, right? And they don't know what the market's done, but they just know I bought it 5 years ago and it's done pretty well for me. If they've got that equity, they may decide to sell it and roll it into other investments, which you can help them buy as well. So landlords can be a phenomenal conversation to have. And again, it's super low pressure, right? Is this the owner of 123 Main Street? Yes, it is. Awesome. Is that still for rent right now? Yeah. Well, great. Listen, my name's Walt Key, and I'm not actually looking to rent a property, but one of the things I love to do is call my local landlords and see how I can help them. Just out of curiosity, would you be potentially interested in selling that investment property if the numbers look great and it gave you the option to roll it into other investments? Worst case, they say, no, I love this one. Great. That's awesome. It sounds like it's cash flowing for you. Are you still looking to buy more? We turned it into a buyer conversation, right? It's all about approaching it with value and just seeing where we might be able to help. Landlords are super fun. Moving on from there, geo leads. Now, this one is a little unique. It is phenomenal because it will brand you as the local market expert if you do it correctly in a specific community. But geo leads, or sometimes we call it geo farming. This is prospecting a specific neighborhood or homeowners association community or a zip code maybe. And what you're doing is you're deciding, where do I want to do my business? And then you're actively calling the homeowners that already live there to build a relationship, spark a conversation, and then with the goal of either at some point we know they're all going to move, because everybody moves, right? Almost no one ever has a forever home, or they have friends and family that are looking to buy and they know you now because you've nurtured the relationship, and so they refer business to you. But ultimately what happens is you eventually start branding yourself within a specific community as your signs keep popping up, and then it crescendos from there. So geo leads can be a lot of fun. I used to do this one regularly back in Central Virginia because we had some really nice, well-established neighborhoods that I like to call, and it's a phenomenal way to grow your database. Small side tangent. We talk about database. We'll get to that towards the latter part of this. If you're not actually maintaining a database of clients and contacts and how often you reach out to them, it can absolutely negatively affect your business. And I'll come back to that when we talk about follow-up. I'll share a story with you that'll really hopefully bring that to light. Expired listings, right? And this is, again, this kind of goes back to the FSBO. The goal is not to convince them that the other agent sucked and you're better and therefore they should list with you. The goal is to build a relationship, see if there's value you can offer them right now, give them some knowledge, give them some data. And sometimes they will relist with you and sometimes they won't, but you still nurture a relationship that works out in the future. And then lastly, door knocking. This is a more physical version of geo lead prospecting, if you think about it. Door knocking can be super, super effective. What most people do wrong is they door knock a neighborhood and they don't know what to say. They don't have any value to bring. And so it's kind of this awkward pause when they open the door and like, who are you? And like, I'm a realtor. And like, we don't want to talk to you. And you're like, damn, okay. Right. And so it can be awkward if you don't prepare to door knock. So what I always taught people when I was teaching door knocking is bring something of value with you. And what works really well, just as a baseline, is you can go into your MLS and you can do a quick pull, last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, depending on how big the neighborhood is you're door knocking and how many sales have happened. Print out a just one page MLS sheet, line by line, of all of the properties in that neighborhood that you're door knocking that have sold in the last 3 months, 6 months, that just enough that it fits on one page. And then take a 1-page bio of you, a couple data points on your sales stats if you want, a paragraph or two about who you are and where you came from and why you love real estate, a picture, phone number, contact, all that jazz. Take the printout of the MLS, take the 1-page bio, staple them together. That's your whole door knocking packet, 2 pieces of paper. And if you're going to do a door knock 50 houses, well, you need 100 pieces of paper because you're going to do 50 packets, right? And what's great about this is if they answer the door, you immediately have something of value to talk about and it doesn't feel weird. And if they don't answer the door, because sometimes they'll be like, I don't know that person, I'm not answering the door. You now have something of value you can leave with them that they can look at and go, oh, I didn't realize that Jan's house down the road sold for that much. We should see what our house is worth. And they have your contact info. So whether they answer the door or not, that little bit of preparation for what we're bringing of value, it benefits you both ways. Right? And door knocking can be a great way to build your business with. Okay, how to get a hold of these folks. So same list that we just talked about. I'm just going to walk through some quick points on how we dive into these. From the sphere perspective, right? You look at your, don't just try to remember who do I know and write those names down. You will not get very far. Again, the average human brain, this is brain science, right? I'm not a neurosurgeon. I'm a nerd and I study stuff. The average human brain can only hold a finite amount of intimate relationships at one time. So if you try to do this from memory, you're not going to get very far. Open up your phone and just start scrolling through. You'll probably thousands, if not many hundreds in your phone. You got lots of contacts. Facebook profile, right? Go to your friends list and start. You can't message everybody on the same day, right? But you can message people in an orderly way to spark the conversation and see how they're doing and how's the family. I haven't talked in a while. What's new with you? What you can do, and I'm not going to steal his thunder because I'm going to have Joshua Grossman do an entire course for you guys on how to leverage Claude AI to grow your business. But one of the things that he has done is he has programmed Claude to message agents from his friends list for him. And then he just responds when they respond. And so it automates that process a little bit and saves some time. But be it your email contact list, your phone contact list, your social media friends list, you got to be kind of diligent about going through and connecting with people, even if you haven't talked to them in a long time. Sometimes even better if you haven't talked to them in a long time, because it gives you something to say, right? Hey, we haven't talked in a long time. Just wanted to catch up. How you been? How's the family? What's new with you? You still at that other job? Like, where are you at now? So your contact list, wherever you have that contact list, do not try to do that from memory. Try to do it from your actual list. And then every time you enter and actually engage with somebody, someone talks with you and they tell you what's going on. And here's the family, and we're over here now doing the thing. They should be going into an actual CRM database. That will help automate the follow-up that we'll talk about at the end. It's super important. For the for sale by owners, like obviously FSBO.com, yard signs when you're driving around. Zillow has a posted by owner section. That's one of my favorites, honestly. It's the only thing I like Zillow for is map search and finding FSBOs. But sometimes you'll find FSBOs with a yard sign that aren't even on Zillow. It happens. Now, more and more, Facebook Marketplace is becoming a big spot to find for sale by owners. And a CL stands for Craigslist. Some of you that are a little bit older than 12, you might remember Craigslist. Craigslist actually is still around. Facebook Marketplace has kind of eclipsed it from the total volume of people using it, but there is still quite a lot of business happening on Craigslist. So don't miss that. You can still use Craigslist in your market as well. For landlords, right? Similar. Marketplace, they're posting their properties for rent. Craigslist, they're still posting it for rent. All of the different rental listing sites, right? ForRent.com, Apartments.com. There's a gazillion of them out there. And even though it says Apartments.com, Apartments.com does allow individual landlords to post a single property for rent. So it's still, you can sort through there and you can still find some gems for landlords. The dialer services, these are going to be for the things that you can't readily do on your own. For example, expired listings and geo leads, geo prospecting. You can acquire that data yourself, but the time and energy it takes to compile that data, it's not worth it. Your time is more valuable. And so getting a dialer service, unless you're, I mean, listen, if you're at Epic, we're doing this for you. We're dropping FSBOs, we're dropping expireds, we're dropping cancels right into our lead ponds for you. We're already doing that work. So don't go pay for a dialer service if you're at Epic. Just go into the lead pond because we've already done it, right? For the other agents that maybe your broker isn't providing those leads already, I've just listed a few of the dialer services. RedX, Mojo, and Vulcan 7 are probably the most popular that are out there. I personally, back in the day, when I was doing a lot of expireds and geo calls, I was doing RedX. Less than $100 a month. They do all of the hard work. They source the data, they skip trace the data, they compile it into a database that you can call from and put notes in and save it and set reminders. So for the expireds, for the geo leads, it's actually super convenient to use a dialer service. I don't have one versus the other that I would say is better. These are all good dialer services, but it's just time consuming to compile the data yourself and process it. Your time is more valuable and it's better spent just making the calls, right? Rather than aggregating the data. So just bear that in mind. A couple questions that people have asked me before. Should I use my personal cell phone or should I get a business line? Whatever you want to do is fine. I will tell you, just Walt Key personally, in all of the years I've called, I've never had a separate number. I've always used my personal cell phone. Even in states where I was licensed, but my area code was not local, which has literally been everywhere because I've been all over the place. I always use my personal cell phone, or if you're in a dialer service, some of the dialers will allow you to get a line that you can dial through the dialer service. I never did that. I just had the data in front of me and I called on my cell phone, or back in the super far back in the day when I had an office line, just call from my office number. So you don't have to have a dedicated business phone number. If you prefer to have a dedicated business number just for your own personal balance of life and personal stuff and business, that's fine. You can get some pretty dirt cheap business lines now. I mean, Google has their own phone lines that they can give you. There's a gazillion different apps out there that'll give you a line for next to nothing. So you can do it if you want to, but you don't have to. And then a couple other points. Just like anything in real estate, going back to another course that I've done since I've done this one, if you're not planning your success out in advance, you're probably not going to be very successful. And what I mean by that is your calendar should have specific days of the week, specific times of that day budgeted and blocked for making these calls so that you can build these relationships. So you have to budget the time or it won't happen. If you're just like, well, whenever I get a free minute, I'll do it. You're not going to do it. Treat your business like a business and budget the priorities onto your calendar so that they get accomplished. And this active prospecting is one of the number one priorities in any real estate agent's business. Consistency wins. What do I mean by that? If you call FSBOs on Monday and you just have a crappy day, you called 25 different phone numbers, 19 of them didn't answer the phone. The 6 that answered the phone, 2 of them said, I'm not interested, and click, they hung up on you. The other 4 said, we're not working with realtors right now. Like total bust, which really never happens, but just worst case scenario, right? Don't let that be how you end your FSBO calls. Consistently making the calls over the course of your career will win every time over one good day or one bad day making the call. So what I used to do, and you don't have to do it my way, I'm just giving you some examples. For me personally, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 to 11, that was my calling blocks on my calendar when I was growing my business. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 9 to 11, I was on the phone with somebody. Maybe I'm calling FSBOs today. Maybe I'm calling my sphere today. Maybe I'm calling, professional networks and building those networks today. Maybe I'm calling landlords today. But every single week, I was 2-hour blocks of time, 3 different days a week. I was making calls. And that allowed me to become the number 1 agent in my office, the number 1 agent across 4 offices, and top 3% of my entire MLS for closed transactions. Never paid for leads, never did any sort of, any kind of paid lead generation or referral partners, just build conversations with people. And I became the top 3% of the entire MLS. So it works if you work it, be consistent, budget the time. And then last but not least on this slide, and we'll get going. People have asked me, especially now, right? And people are so text heavy. They say, well, why don't I just mass text them? Why don't I can text faster than I can have a phone call. Here's the reality. Text can be a great way to follow up and nurture a relationship, but a text is not a way to build a relationship. You need to have a genuine, real conversation with somebody. And the best way to do that is either face-to-face or over the phone, because you just can't do it anywhere else or any other way. So save the text for the follow-up campaigns, for the drips, right? For the, hey, happy Friday, hope you're having an amazing weekend. What do you got planned, right? Save the text for the nurture. You have to build the relationship with a phone call. Just bear that in mind. Okay. So with all of these conversations, obviously there's a script and we'll talk about that, but what do you kind of say? Let me give you some general frameworks on how to actually have these conversations. Have a script, but don't be scripted. What do I mean by that? Well, one of the first things I learned is that there's a whole lot of different people out there that will tell you how to make conversations happen, and they're all doing it their way. Their way is not your way. So one of the first things I started teaching agents is, here's my script. Do whatever you want with it to make it your own. I break it down like this. This is kind of how I explained it to people as I was doing cold call classes. A script is kind of like the outline of your book report, right? Remember back to high school English class and they're like, we're going to read Romeo and Juliet, and then we're going to write a book report. Well, before the book report was due, the rough draft was due, right? The outline was due. And what's interesting is that almost all of the outlines were darn near identical, 95% identical. The actual book report was very different because you hone in on one particular aspect versus another, and you speak in your native slang versus another, and they're all different. The outline's the same. Your script is the outline. It is the framework through which you tell the story. And so you got to look at a script and read it for yourself out loud and go, that doesn't sound like me. I would never say y'all. I would say yuns, right? Or I would never say, how are you doing? I'd say, what have you been up to? Right? Well, I'm just making these up on the fly, but you understand my point. Turn the script into your voice. how you would speak to somebody, but keep the framework in place so that it guides the conversation properly. Okay. Because you don't want to sound, and you do not want to sound like a robot when you're on the phone with somebody and you're reading it verbatim. You need to internalize it, you need to practice it, and you need to be able to have the conversation with the framework in your head and then just flex the actual the speaking wherever it goes. You don't want to be reading this while you're on the phone with somebody. We're always going to focus on adding value. That's why when you look at the scripts that I'm going to give you guys, they all have a value proposition based on the individual person we're trying to speak to. FSBOs have a completely different value proposition than an expired listing. Landlords have a completely different value proposition than a strategic partner, right? Your friends and family, your past clients have different value propositions than name whatever. Everyone has a different problem that needs solved. Everyone's in a unique position. So everyone has a different value proposition that you need to bring to the table. So when we focus on how we add value to the individual people and we build the script around that, it becomes a very casual, relaxed conversation. And if they say, no, I'm not interested, that's okay. They're not saying no to you. They just decided that they don't want the value that you're bringing to the table. Make the call to the next person. Someone wants the value. On the scripts and any conversation, and you guys probably know this internally, but listen more than you speak, which is weird as I'm doing all the talking here, right? I'm saying listen more than you speak. But when you're engaging in relationship building conversation, ask great questions and be quiet for a minute. Let them talk, because you will hear what it is they need you to talk about, what it is they need you to present as the value as they're talking to you. And here's the fun thing about human psychology. The more somebody talks to you, the more comfortable and receptive they are when you talk back. If you do all the talking first, it's very awkward and uncomfortable. But if they've talked to you first and you're responding and you're mirroring and you're repeating back, and you're identifying the value propositions and you're taking off ramps, we'll talk about that in a second. It's a much more comfortable and casual conversation, and it makes the connection faster. So don't be afraid to just ask a good question and be quiet and let them talk. And then for the off ramps, right? When you ask that question and you're listening to what they're saying, if the person you're talking to says something unrelated to real estate, take that off ramp. And what I mean by that is go deeper into that piece of the conversation. So for example, if I'm talking to a for sale by owner or an expired listing or whoever, and I say something like, what's your ultimate goal here? What are you going to do once it sells? And they say, well, we're really trying to get closer to the grandbabies. They're out in South Carolina and we're down here in Virginia, and it's just too long to drive. Don't go into, oh, well, great, let's sell this house so you can get closer. No. Take the off ramp. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Tell me more about the grandbabies. How old are they now? What are they into? When was the last time you visited them? Ah, gotcha, right? Dive deeper into that's where the relationships get built. The personal connections. Dive deeper into those before you bring it back to real estate. So, well, listen, I would love to, they sound amazing. I'd love to help you with that. Do you have the right numbers, marketing? Can I show you something? Can I send you something? Right, depending on who you're talking to help you with that. Don't miss those off ramps, because they are where the relationships get built. Be genuine, make a friend. Listen, when I say be genuine, I mean that. Be who you are, talk how you talk. Not everyone is the ideal client for you. That's okay. Do not try to force yourself to fit into a client's box. That client might be for someone else. You might have a great agent you can refer them to, for all you know, but if it's not the right connection for you, if you can't make a friend with that person, then don't try to force the business relationship if you would never force the personal relationship. I hope that makes sense to you. So be yourself, be genuine, talk how you talk. And the goal is just to make friends that we can follow up with and nurture. And then I almost end almost all my calls, regardless of who I'm talking to, regardless of how we initiated the conversation, regardless of where we landed, unless they're just like, yeah, absolutely, sell this for me, which is rare, right? Again, you don't usually do that on the first call. I always like to end the conversation with something along the lines of, would it be okay if we stayed in touch? right? Hey, Jan, this was a fantastic time. I would really appreciate talking to you. I can't wait for you to get over to the grandbabies. Would it be okay if we just stayed in touch? Could I ping you periodically and see how things are going? All right, they almost, if you've done the rest of this properly, they almost always say yes to that. It's a very low pressure, low key approach, and you've already built enough of the relationship that they don't mind staying in touch with you. Okay. So ask the permission to stay in touch. So when they get touch points from you, it's expected, right? It's not, who's this scammer sending me this junk? Oh, that's Walt. He sent me his market update, right? So ask, would it be okay if we stay in touch? And then stay in touch. Okay. And just talking about staying in touch. There are some ways to properly follow up with people. And here's what I need you to understand. In the real estate space, right? We are the marketing experts. We know everything. Like we got all the data points. And if we don't have it, our Realtors Association has it. There's a graphic that they made, right? Most of your friends, most of your family, most of your past clients don't care. They don't need all your nerdy market data right now. So they're not that interested in it. Okay. So be mindful of that and create your follow-up in ways that had value for what they need. So a couple quick points. Most people, I said this earlier, most people will not do a deal with you right away. That's okay. Some will. It happens. Some will refer you pretty quickly. Some will actually blow your mind. They'll be like, oh, I'm so glad you called. I was just thinking about getting a realtor. Like, that's rare, but it does happen. But ultimately, the conversation and the would it be okay if we stayed in touch is a data collection exercise to start building the relationship, get the contact information you need to nurture the relationship, and figure out what the right touch points are based on the value proposition you're trying to convey from the conversation. Yeah. From that, you can then create a touch point plan. And it will build your brand, it will build your relationships, it will build your business. That touch point plan will be a little bit different for depending on who you're talking to, right? But it doesn't have to be sales all the time. It doesn't have to be real estate all the time. I'll give you an example. Back in Central Virginia, I had built a pretty solid database doing exactly what I'm teaching you to do today. Just having conversations with people. Would it be okay if we stayed in touch? Great. What's your best email? Blah, 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 blah. Put them in a CRM, follow up consistently, nurture the value, all the good stuff. And so I built that database. One of the ways I personally built my database is I used a weekly newsletter. It was not a real estate newsletter. It was not a real estate market update. It was a community newsletter. And 90% of what I put in my newsletter was, here are the local events coming up this weekend. Here's a couple news stories, positive news stories in our community. And Jane Smith won the junior high spelling bee. Congratulations, right? Little stuff like that. Here's a couple links to something interesting that might be going on in the area. And then I had a little bit of market data built in, right? Here's the 30-year fixed interest rate and a 1-year chart. Here's a snapshot of what is active, pending, and sold this week. If you want more info, click the hyperlink, right? Not a bunch of data in the newsletter, but enough real estate related data that it always reminded them this guy's a realtor, he knows what he's talking about. But the bulk of the newsletter was fun, friendly, community related stuff. What that did is it kept me relevant to my client database because most of them didn't need real estate right then. And it allowed me to leverage social media because I could take my newsletter, and because it was community focused, I could post it into all of our local real estate or Facebook groups, community Facebook groups, what's going on in this community, word of mouth, this community, right? All the chatty Cathy, what's going on down the road kind of Facebook groups. I could post my newsletter in that because that's what those groups are built for. And people would read the newsletter and then subscribe because they liked it. And now more people are getting added to my database without me doing anything because the relationship I was building now was a conversation through social media via the newsletter. So it's a beautiful way to do this. Now, the quote there, the some really smart person, the size of your database determines the size of your business. That's me. I said that. I said that after I sold my first real estate business for multi 6 figures to another agent. Now, why do I bring that up? Because everything I just talked to you about the importance of your touch point, your database, your nurture, one of the key metrics that we used to evaluate what my business was worth was the quality of my database and how often I was engaged with my previous clients, sphere of influence, everyone in the database. And I sold a real estate. Most of you think, oh, well, I'm going to retire from real estate and that's it. I'm done. I won't make commissions anymore. When I moved from Virginia to Florida, I sold that real estate business to another agent for multi six figures because I had built a good business and I was nurturing a proper database. That's how important the database is. I don't care if you're at Epic and you're using Lofty, or if you're somewhere else, you're using KV Core, you're using Follow Up Boss, you're using a spreadsheet on Excel, for all I care. But you have to have people in your database and you have to nurture it properly if you want to grow your business successfully without paying for it. Okay, let me stop there. I know we got a few minutes left. That's one of the longest chit chats I think I've done. That's almost 9 minutes ago. What questions, comments, thoughts do you have? I'm going to go through the chat really quick. I see that Misa was doing a great job dropping the links in there. Trina said it happened to me. I have been cussed out. How often though? Once or twice? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you're never going to talk to that person again. Just going through the list, the newsletters in there. In New York, we can't make cold calls. So what's your best suggestion for alternative? Yeah, so New York is crazy. My best alternative is move out of New York. Florida's open. Happy to find you a house here in Florida. It'll be cheaper. It'll be warmer, and you can make calls. No, I'm kidding. So think about the ways you can build conversations outside of the cold call. So for example, what you might do is really leverage those Facebook groups I was still talking about. You can build a weekly newsletter now, and then start dripping that newsletter into those Facebook groups. So that becomes essentially your conversation. Now it's a little bit of a one-way conversation, right? Because you're posting the data and they're reading it, and then some of them will subscribe. But that's one way to start building your brand in your community, start getting your name out there. It's just a super fun way to do that. Come on down. We'll co-list it. Let's go. You tell me where you want to be, how close to the beach. We'll make it happen. But that's one thing I would say. If you can't cold call, leverage your weekly newsletter as a way to get your name out there, to build your brand in your community, and everyone starts seeing your. I'll give you a quick example. When I moved to Florida, I did the same thing here in Florida. I started a brand new database, less people, obviously, because I'm brand new to Florida, started posting it in all my local real estate Facebook groups. And I remember the first time that the admin of the community Facebook group tagged me in a comment when someone said, hey, I'm looking for a realtor. The admin of the Facebook group tagged me. Now, I didn't know that person directly. Like I'd never met them. I had no relationship with them. But because they saw the newsletter, they saw the value I was adding to our community, I was top of mind with them. And when they heard realtor, they immediately thought of my name. Now, you got to, it's one thing if a random person tags you on Facebook and says, well, it's great. It's another when the admin of the group that tags you. There's some we'll call professional clout there, right? The guy who made this group is tagging me. That's something. So the newsletters can be super valuable for things like that. Even if you're not cold calling to build it, you can still build it through community groups. All right. We only have a couple more minutes, so let me just make sure there are no other questions, comments, thoughts. I'm going to drop the resources one more time. As you go through the scripts, if you have questions, if you're like, hey, how would I tweak this? Could I say this? Reach out to me, ping me. You guys probably all have my contact information now. All of the scripts for all of the different conversations are in the Google Drive. And all you have to do is pick a few to start with. Don't try to do them all at once. Pick 2 or 3 conversations that you really want to focus in on. Budget that time onto your calendar on purpose in advance. What day of the week, what hours of the day am I going to make these calls? And then hold yourself accountable to that so that you can start growing your business and having the success that you want by doing the work that you want to do. It won't cost you anything but your time. You won't pay for anything. You won't have the lead generation to pay for. You'll just have great conversations that build your business. Okay. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns before we wrap this up? Going once, going twice. All right, have a fantastic Wednesday. I hope that you put this into practice. It is a phenomenal way to grow your business. You guys have a great day. Talk to you soon.